The flat where they were all staying was on the 8th floor of this tower block in East London. Over 5 days running up to Christmas, it became a torture chamber. The mood turned menacing. 130 injuries had been inflicted on his body, and all done to protect another child in the flat from a malicious force known in Congolese life as Kindoki.
The holidays are supposed to be filled with joy, laughter, and creating memories with family. But for one family, it was filled with accusations, hate, and even death. Welcome to my channel, everyone. Courtney Elise here, aka Court Crimes TV. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment. Also, hit that notification bell. That way you'll know every time I upload. Let's get into the video. In December of 2010, a 15-year-old boy by the name of Kristy Bamu arrived to London from Paris with his 4 siblings for the Christmas holidays. While in London, they would be staying with their oldest sister, Kristy Bamu, and her fiance, Eric Bikubi.
Kristy Bamu had travelled with his siblings from their home in France to spend the 2010 Christmas holidays at the home of their eldest sister Magali and her partner Eric Bikubi.
Their parents decided to stay back in Paris dealing with their business. The Bamus owned a very successful carpentry business in the suburbs of Paris and told Kristy and his siblings that they would meet up in London for the new year. Everything started off perfectly fine until one day Kristy accidentally wet his pants. Now you gotta remember, there was a bunch of people in this house. A total of like 8 people in this entire house. And I'm assuming this wasn't a very big house, okay, or a flat. They're in London. The bathrooms were probably all occupied. And while waiting for one to become open, he accidentally peed himself. This had to be embarrassing because he's a 15-year-old boy, okay? And instead of his uncle, the man he looked to as an uncle, being like, it's okay, we all have accidents, Eric, Magali's fiance, was off in some other type of world and decided that Kristy was a witch and he was doing witchcraft on the family. All because he peed himself. And Eric decided he had to put a stop to it. But before I get into what all he did to Kristy and his siblings, let me give you a background on Eric. Eric was born in 1983 in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. His mother died during childbirth, leaving his father to take care of him. That would be short-lived because what I found online, his father ended up passing away from AIDS when Eric was just a little boy. So he would be placed in custody of his uncle. The irony of this, right? As a child, Eric would suffer a really tragic fall, and he would suffer from brain damage. This fall caused schizophrenia-like delusions and psychosis. He said he would see things that weren't there, like rats, and visions of his own brother sneaking into his room trying to kill him. At age 7, he moved to East London with some relatives and his uncle. This is where he would grow up and live the rest of his life. In 2004, he would meet Kristy Bamu, and they would start a very on and off again relationship. It was very toxic and very rocky. Magali said that in the beginning, Eric was very nice and very protective. But as time went on, that protection turned into him being very controlling. He wouldn't allow her to wear makeup, have friends, or go out. He would make her eat off the floor. And if she refused, he would beat her. He would beat her so much to where she would have black eyes. Okay, he was crazy. But on top of all of that, Eric was weirdly obsessed with witchcraft. Weirdly obsessed. That's all he talked about was witchcraft. Now, this ties back to Kristy because, like I said, Eric thought Kristy was possessed with demons. All because he wet his pants on an accident. So to fix Kristy, he decided to exorcise him.
When Kristy wet himself inside the flat, they became convinced he was a witch and used an armoury of weapons to exorcise the evil spirits.
Eric would force Kristy and his siblings to pray for deliverance. For 3 days, depriving them of food, water, and sleep. They were beaten with everything under the sun, such as knives, metal bars, sticks, even a hammer and chisel.
Children weren't allowed to eat, sleep, or drink. They were forced to pray and take part in what was a sadistic ritual that was under the guise of deliverance.
He would strike Kristy in the mouth with the hammer and the metal bar. He would shove this metal bar deep into Kristy's mouth, knocking his teeth out. He smashed ceramic tiles and glass bottles on top of Kristy's head. He would use pliers to twist Kristy's ears, torturing this poor child.
They became convinced he was a witch and used an armoury of weapons to exorcise the evil spirits. There were various knives, a hammer, metal bars, wooden poles, and various tools that were left heavily blood-stained. They twisted his ears with these pliers, and this bag of ceramic tiles was smashed over the teenage boy.
Kristy's siblings were being tortured as well, but they confessed to being witches to escape any further beating. Eric then forced them to join in on the beatings of Kristy. They looked to their sister Magali, their oldest sister Magali, for help, but instead of helping them, she encouraged Eric and even joined in on the torture.
This is Kristy. Behind on either side are his brothers and sisters. And in the middle is Magali, the one in London, the one they went to stay with, the one who would later accuse the others of witchcraft, and the one who would help to kill her younger brother.
Their sister Kelly stated, it was as if they were obsessed with witchcraft. In their minds, they had decided that they had come there to kill them. The day before Christmas, on Christmas Eve, Eric called Pierre Bamu, which is Kristy's father, Magali's father, and told him Kristy was possessed, and if he did not come collect him immediately, he would kill Kristy.
Then came the ultimatum from Bikubi on Christmas morning. Come and collect Kristy, or I will kill him.
Pierre Bamu said that his kids called him a total of 45 times and even talked to Kristy on the phone. He said Kristy begged his father to come and get him and that if he didn't, Eric was going to kill him. Pierre initially dismissed this. He did not think Eric would do something like this. He looked to Eric as a son, as his own son. But eventually he got over this denial and was desperately trying to find any possible flight to London. But Paris was in the middle of a terrible winter snowstorm and all planes were grounded.
As the situation grew more and more desperate in the flat in Newham, so did the number of calls to Mr. and Mrs. Bamu in Paris. From just after midnight on Christmas Day, there were 45 in just 7 hours. Mr. Bamu answered many of them, but there was just silence at the other end. Still in disbelief, the parents tried to find a way, but Paris was grounded both by snow and by holidays. Car hire companies were shut, planes weren't flying, and trains weren't running.
On Christmas Day of 2010, Eric decided to do a ritualistic cleansing of Kristy. So he put Kristy in the bathtub and he made Kristy's siblings stand outside and watch. Kristy at this point was so weak and fragile from all the beatings he took from Eric, he couldn't fight back. Eric submerged this child in ice cold water. Kristy slipped under and drowned.
Kristy was so badly beaten and so weak he even asked to die. He later drowned during an act of exorcism in the bathroom on Christmas morning.
When paramedics found him, Kristy was covered in deep cuts, bruises, and several of his teeth were missing. Pierre Bamu said that he got a call Christmas night at 8 p.m. from Kelly in the hospital stating that Kristy was dead. Magali and Eric would be arrested immediately. In 2012, the trial would begin. In court, it was revealed that a plumber was actually sent to their flat 20 minutes before Kristy died by the council to their flat. He said he heard splashing in the bathroom, but nothing else seems suspicious. You're a plumber. Why didn't you go in the bathroom where there's like water? You just looked around the front room and was like, all right, you good. You didn't go check the bathroom where there's water, where there's plumbing going on there. You didn't go check that. Make it make sense. Neighbors told the court that they heard angry shouting and continuous music playing throughout the night before Kristy died. Another neighbor stated, I was aware of a lot of noise coming from the flat, and it sounded like a fish market. The noise was so loud that I shut my window. But you didn't report this? You didn't call the police and say, hey, something's going on at this house? There's always some type of fighting or anger and music playing. You don't report it? I don't understand this. Kristy had 130 separate injuries and died from a combination of beatings and drowning.
130 injuries had been inflicted on his body, and all done to protect another child in the flat from a malicious force known in Congolese life as Kindoki.
Magali tried to play the woe it's me, I'm a victim card in court. She tried to bring up her background by saying she had it rough growing up because at the age of 13, she was sent to East London because she's from where Eric is from as well. But at the age of 13, she was sent to live with her mother's niece in East London. She told the court that she was forced to cook, clean, and look after the children, and she was not allowed to go to school or learn anything. She insisted that growing up in the UK, she was very westernized and did not believe in witchcraft or anything of the occult. Long story short, all of this revolves around witchcraft, and she's trying to say she wasn't participating with anything witchcraft. Eric is the one who brought this up to her. She said Eric would be the one who would constantly go on these long tangents about witchcraft. She said she just listened because at that time that was the best thing she could do. So you see how she's trying to distance herself, saying she doesn't even know anything about witchcraft. She didn't grow up around this. Eric grew up around this. Eric was obsessed with whatever they had going on. She wasn't. Eric brainwashed her. That's what she's really trying to say. Eric brainwashed her into believing what he believed. Magali broke down in tears several times listening to her siblings talk about the torture Kristy went through at their hands. The court would ask Magali if she intended on killing Kristy, and she said, "No, never. He's my brother and I love him. What I did was because I was forced to. What happened, I could not stop." Kelly saw straight through the facade Magali was trying to put on. Kelly said that Kristy asked for forgiveness. He asked again and again, and Magali did absolutely nothing. She didn't give a damn. She said we deserved it. Kelly was not here for the shenanigans Magali was putting on. Kelly said, "I'm sure Magali still believes, even to this day, that we're witches." Remember, they said in the beginning that they looked to Magali for help. They looked to their older sister to help them, and Magali turned the other way, or she joined in on the torture of all her siblings. Eric, on the other hand, throughout the entire trial, he was emotionless. What little emotion he did show was to crack jokes with his team. Eric pleaded guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility because of his schizophrenia-like disorder. Remember I said he had that fall earlier on in his life, so they're trying to use the fact that he was crazy. He was crazy, but I mean, they're trying to really push that as he was insane to, I guess, give him a lighter sentence. However, the jury decided he wasn't insane at the time of Kristy's death and found him guilty of murder. Magali, even though she was trying very hard to play this victim role, was convicted of murder as well. Eric was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, while Magali was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In a statement to the court, Pierre Bamu wrote, "We were always fond of Eric and regarded him as a son. We were proud that he would call us mom and dad. As a family, we planned our futures together. Eric and I were to open a restaurant in London as a legacy for our family. The pain of Kristy's death is something that cannot be calculated or measured. Kristy was a fine young man, kind and considerate, much loved by his family and friends. We saw that he was becoming a man. We hoped that he would work with me in my carpentry business and one day take over." Kristy was also a role model to his siblings. The rest of Kristy's family also released a statement. "We will never forget, but to put our lives back into sync, we must forgive. We take no comfort in the verdicts. We have been robbed of a beloved son, a daughter, and a son-in-law. Kristy died in unimaginable circumstances at the hands of people he loved and trusted. People who we loved and trusted." Now, here's my thoughts on this entire situation. I don't understand how Magali's parents didn't somehow hear about Eric past or Eric's abusive ways towards Magali. I'm pretty sure Magali brought it up sometimes, okay? I'm pretty sure they saw bruises on her. There was also a case where before Kristy and his siblings went over to Magali's house, Eric also held another woman hostage because he thought she was a witch. She only got out because she escaped. He held her hostage for 3 days and forced her to pray and was doing all these ritualistic things to her. I don't know how his parents didn't see this, how they didn't notice this, but that's just my opinions. Another thing, if you got 45 calls from your children stating their uncle is beating them and that he's going to kill me, and Eric called you and told you he was going to kill your son, why didn't you just call the police? If you knew you couldn't get there in any type of way, why didn't you just call the police? I'm not trying to blame his parents, but why didn't you just call the police and have the police go over there and do a wellness check? Who knows? But rest in peace, Kristy.